Good afternoon, actually. It's already afternoon, so good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. And sir, thank you very much for such a warm introduction and warm reception. And thank you very much, such a crowded audience that during the middle of the day you found a time to visit the Körber Foundation and to meet the Polish foreign minister. I've been asked to share with you some comments about the role of Poland in Europe. So to talk about the role of a country in the international stage may be a bit misleading, as it could imply some sort of a functional specialization and by implication some kind of a hierarchy among sovereign states. In reality, contemporary international order is based on the fundamental assumption that all sovereign states are equal and every state's role is basically the same, which is to provide for the security of its citizens and create conditions for the economic and social development. In other words, all states pursue their interests. It's only at the stage of implementation or operationalization of those interests that we may talk about different roles states assume. When we talk about roles of the states in international affairs, we are in fact talking about the foreign policy. As I said, all the states in the world pursue their interests, and I could think of no exception of this universal rule. Interests, however, which have traditionally been defined in terms of power, are not the only source of foreign policy. They are modified by two other factors, the importance of which cannot be underestimated in today's world. So, after interest, there are values, or what we may also call the moral dimension of politics. Values are usually source of positive impulses for change in the spheres of national and foreign policies. Whenever they are breached, there appears a natural will in a society to restore them. And whenever we see a convergence of our values with those of the other states, we naturally tend to support and promote them. Second, what determines the direction of a state's foreign policy or its role in international affairs is legitimacy. Legitimacy constitutes boundaries within which a state must operate in the process of realization of its interests abroad. They result from international obligations, such as membership of international organizations and treaties, but the true source lies in the democratic mandate given by the society to its government through elections. Only with those three elements in mind, namely interest, values, and legitimacy, we can talk about the roles of state in international affairs. With this short introduction, taken maybe from the political science, a little bit taken into account, allow me now to go into more detail and explain to you my perspective regarding the role of Poland in Europe. With the end of this year, we are concluding the 25th anniversary of the Polish-German Treaty of Good Neighborship and Friendly Cooperation. The anniversary provides us with many opportunities to take stock of the cooperation between our two countries. Cooperation, which has been one of the cornerstones shaping European integration project since the fall of the Iron Curtain. Polish-German reconciliation was, in a way, a symbol of reuniting of Europe. Last 25, actually 27 years were a period of extremely dynamic development of relations between our societies and governments. This new robust partnerships of Germany and Poland became one of the drivers of the united Europe. To realize how much has changed between us, it is enough to go through the Polish-German border, where not so long ago the usual waiting time for the trucks was about 50 hours, maybe, a couple of days, sometimes a week. Today, this border is almost invisible in both mental and physical sense. It has not disappeared, of course, but was symbolically transformed from something that divides into something that connects us. The 25th anniversary of the signing of the Polish-German Treaty of Cooperation is a good opportunity to ask the following questions. How the Polish-German reconciliation became reality, and what conclusions can we draw from it in the wider context of the European Union? First of all, the extension of European Union membership to Central and Eastern Europe was in the interest of both Poland and Germany. But what is perhaps more important is that it was in the interest of the European Union as a whole. Secondly, it was a positive expression of the convergence of values of two great European nations, a sign of our aspirations to finally overcome the eternal dilemmas haunting European politics and forge a new Europe, free from war and destruction of the past. Thirdly, the partnership was implemented within the framework of a mutual respect and trust, something that is often called, let me quote, the European spirit of compromise. It was based upon commonly agreed rules and norms embodied in the European treaties. It was therefore conducted within the limits of the democratic legitimacy. Of course, after 25 years of implementation of this treaty, it's high time to repair some asymmetries in these treaties, especially for Poles living in Germany. Today, after decades of relative stability and development, Europe has been confronted by several crises that shook it to the core and to which it was not prepared to respond, neither in political nor in conceptual sense. First, the financial crisis that spilled over into the Eurozone quickly laid bare the underlying conflicts of interest that have existed between its different members. And looking at the conflict of interest, we realized that the European Union is not a simple clump of altruistic states. The consequences of the economic crisis have not been limited to Eurozone only. They also put pressure on one of the cornerstones of the European project, namely the single market. And as a result, we have protection practices and attempts to limit competitiveness in the European Union. Second, Russia's violent response to an internal political crisis in Ukraine quickly became a direct challenge to Europe, to security and credibility of its common foreign policy. But most of all of a challenge to our values. And speaking about the Russian violent response, we have to define it properly. Annexation of Crimea, support for the rebellion, simply aggression against Ukraine. Finally, the migration crisis not only raised justified fears in our societies, but also undermined the faith into the impartiality and effectiveness of the European institutions. The decisions made during the height of the crisis and the way they were made have been considered by many member states to be a clear breach of democratic legitimacy. Conclusions we should draw from this crisis relate to the three aspects I mentioned before, the question of interests, values, and of legitimacy. Let me start with the interests. One of the great innovations of the European project was a successful combination of economic sphere with the political one. Economic integration was made to serve a worthwhile political aim of establishing permanent peace among European nations. War was to become, and let me quote again, not merely unthinkable, but materially impossible, in the words of the Schuman Declaration. It has proved to be an extremely successful model, confirmed inter alia by awarding the European Union with the Nobel Peace Prize in 2012. It was understood rightly that economic welfare constitutes one of the main conditions of a stable democracy, which in turn best guarantees maintenance of robust human rights and the rule of law. We see in the single market not only an effective vehicle of economic advancement, but also an important mechanism for safeguarding our political unity. The rise of economic protectionism, especially across Western Europe, which is one of the negative results of the economic crisis, undermines the vital pillar of European democratic security. Moreover, it triggers phenomena which some today are not so happy about, such as intra-European migration. The directive concerning the posting of workers is a case in point here. Tinkering with the four freedoms of the single market by introducing laws that go against its spirit carries much bigger risk than just economic degradation of the whole European Union. Instead of fiddling with the single market, we should consolidate it by establishing a genuine market for services as well as the digital one. We do believe that freedom of movement that has recently been driving a wedge between Central Europe and some of our Western partners underpins European Union's economic success and should not fall prey to ill-conceived national economic interests. One of the proposed remedies to the problems troubling European economy rely on the concept of multi-speed integration. Implementing this proposal would create additional line of not only economic but also a political division within the European Union of 28. Something we definitely do not need in the current circumstances. By excluding 9 or maybe more European Union member states from this new cycle of enhanced integration, we might create a risk to the cohesion of the single market, an economic and political cornerstone of the European project. In the long-term perspective, this would not strengthen but weaken the European economy. And further weakening of the European economy is clearly not in the interest of Poland. As a matter of fact, it's not in the interest of Germany too, nor in the interest of any other European Union member states. Is there therefore in our common interest to maintain the unity and cohesiveness of the European project? Now, let me turn to the issue of values. The fall of the Iron Curtain 27 years ago was made possible because of the aspiration of European societies to overcome the artificial division created after the end of the World War II. It was a proof that the power of ideas and values can be stronger than the power of politics. The enlargement of the European Union by the 10 new member states in 2004 was a direct result of these idealistic aspirations. The prospect of membership or close association with the European Union still remains one of the most effective instruments of European influence in its neighborhood. In 2014, the aspiration of the Ukrainian society that reflected its democratic ideals and values were met with violent resistance from Ukraine's neighbor, Russia, which saw in it an unacceptable breach of its interests. One of the reactions of the European Union to the crisis was an intensification of the discussion about the common foreign and defense policy. Those discussions resulted, among others, in the endorsement by the European Council of a new European Union global strategy. The emphasis on increasing the resilience of the Euro neighbors in the European global strategy clearly points that it is not Europe's aim to foment chaos and disorder or arrange regime changes in its environment. Quite the contrary. We want to see our neighbors enjoying political as well as economic stability, as it directly affects our own stability and security. But whenever we see a reflection of our values in other societies, we cannot stay neutral. Speaking about European Union Eastern policy, I have to bring up Russia, as our neighborhood stability and viability of our values has much to do with Moscow's conduct. And as much as the record of our bilateral relation is burdened by tragedies and atrocities, it is much more than difficult history that make us think critically about Russia. Our actions in relation to Europe's eastern neighborhood result from a sober assessment of Russia's revisionist posture and activities. In the 90s, we were minded, or some may say we were living under illusion, to think that the new Russia would abide by the international norms and values as the basis of its foreign policy. The last couple of years proved us terribly wrong. Unfortunately, with Russia breaching the OSCE principles and the UN Charter, and going much farther in jettisoning international norms than the Soviet Union. What Russia has been doing is, in fact, acting by the playbook of the notorious 20th century geopolitics. It has been playing by the playbook of power politics, unrestrained neither by norms nor democratic legitimacy. Thus, what defines our policy towards Russia and what we would like to European Union's policy to be defined by is adherence to freedom, democracy, independence, values which we believe our eastern neighbors have the right to cherish, just as Poles and peoples of Central Europe have been cherishing them in the last 27 years. These notions that I think all of us here share have always been an important driver of Poland's foreign policy. It is thus Poland's role, as well as its duty, to protect and project them both within Europe and globally, because wherever they are breached, we feel that sooner or later, our very security will be at stake. The question of values in international affairs also relates to another core aspect of Europe's external relations, the transatlantic relations. It has become even more relevant today. During the last 2 decades, Europe has dramatically decreased the potential of its military forces. The process was accompanied by the gradual but steady reduction of American military presence on our continent. We trusted that there is no further need to keep our military on alert to such extent as during the Cold War. We were living by hopes for endless strategic pause and the peace dividend. Unfortunately, the European but also global security architecture created after the end of the Cold War is being questioned and attacked by more and more frequently. The balance of power in many geopolitical hotspots of the world is changing, and from the perspective of the West, it is usually a change for worse. Revisionist and imperialist policies whose aim is to change the status quo, are re-emerging across the world. At times such as this, it would be foolish to introduce another line of division within the Western community of democracies. It's the ultimate community of values that underpins the political and military alliance of Europe and America. It was thanks to the American security guarantees that Europe was able to develop peacefully. It is our conviction that Europe still needs America, and our role should be to remind Americans that it also needs Europe. Finally, I would like to touch upon the question of limits and legitimacy. Poland conducts its foreign policy within the limits imposed by international law, particularly the Charter of the United Nations, of which it is one of the founding states. In the area of European security, Poland has always been an active and a constructive member of the Helsinki process and fully supports the aims of the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe. Together with Germany and 26 other states, it's a loyal member of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization and a staunch supporter of the Transatlantic Alliance, which we see is the best guarantee of our independence and security. For 12 past years, my country has also been a member of the European Union. The membership in the European Union benefited Poland in many ways, and Polish society remains unequivocally supportive of the European project. Last year have shown, however, that this support is not without its limits. Polish, and I believe many other European societies, including Germany, I just heard, are not ready to accept solutions in politically sensitive areas, solutions that are made without the participation or against the will. To make my point, let me return again to the issues of a financial and economic crisis that has affected Europe for the last 8 years. By influencing the stability of the common currency in Europe, it transformed itself into an economic and eventually an acute political crisis. I believe this is a well-known sequence of events here in Germany. The decision to disburse rescue funds necessary to save Greece from the bankruptcy and, in effect, Eurozone from collapse was made possible only after meticulous scrutiny from the national parliaments of the Eurozone member states. The competence of national parliaments to supervise states' expenditures is one of the core principles of democracy. It was then a fundamental question of a democratic legitimacy. Neither Germany, nor Finnish, neither Dutch, nor Slovak taxpayer is yet ready to write a blank check for supranational unelected authority to do whatever it takes with his or her money. I would like you now to compare this with the situation confronting Poland and many other European member states during the height of the migration crisis. A decision about relocation made against the will of a significant number of member states, a decision whose effectiveness was almost certain to be of a very little practical value, was something that clearly went beyond the limits of what many European societies considered legitimate. By saying legitimate, I mean here in accordance with the rules which we, the member states and the European Union institutions, has established and committed ourselves to respect. Firstly, the Schengen Agreement sets the framework for an active management of the European Union's external border. Yet, what we have seen was not the protection of our borders, but just the opposite, a reckless policy opening Europeans' door wide. Secondly, the Commission's, as well as some member states' approach to opening external border lacks political consistency. Why, on one hand, there is such skepticism towards visa liberation for Georgians and Ukrainians, all in all European nations, and on the other hand, such a strong receptiveness towards millions of migrants from the southern neighborhood, out of whom only a proportion flee war atrocities. Thirdly, the way the decisions were taken by the European Commission was not legitimate at all. By imposing them on the member states, the Commission significantly overstepped its authority, in fact positioning itself above national governments, which enjoy democratic legitimacy. This is why we, meaning the current government of Poland, have voiced our concern over how the refugee conundrum is being addressed, both as far as the decision-making process is concerned and as regards the substance of the decisions taken. Ladies and gentlemen, concluding, I would like once again to return to the question of a Polish-German reconciliation. The process has been largely successful because it balanced our respective interests, values, and was conducted within the limits imposed by what our societies consider just and legitimate. Problems haunting Europe today are tremendous, but not irreparable. If Europe ensures the convergence of interests of its members, if its members manage to conduct their policies with enough self-restraint and within a framework of a mutual trust, it will be better able to overcome the challenges that it faces today and that it will face in the near future. I thank you very much for listening to my presentation. I will be happy also to participate in the open discussion with you.